Cast your mind back to your formative tween years. Did you maybe have a poster of your fave teen heartthrob on your wall? Did you maybe dabble in a little bit of fan fiction? Maybe you secretly thought that if you could just meet your celebrity crush, they would fall in love with you? My name is Allegra, and I've made it my mission to understand how we get sucked into fandoms. I believe that the media that we consumed as children plays a huge part in our lives. So, every other week, we revisit one huge cultural phenomena from our formative years. Come listen to Stan on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.
Today's episode contains sensitive topics, such as miscarriage and infant death. So if you are sensitive to these topics, please listen at your own discretion.
What is art without the muse? Many of Western art's most famous works are depictions of women. But who were these women? Do they have their own stories to share with the world? Hello and welcome to ArtMuse, a podcast that aims to reshape the ways in which we interpret well-known works of art by paying dues to the women whose images have been immortalized, but whose names and stories have been wrongfully overlooked. While these women's faces are familiar to viewers around the world, their identities have been largely forgotten. Together we will explore the important lives and legacy of the female muse and appreciate these works of art from a new perspective, through the eyes of the women whose image stares back at us. Is the muse in actuality just as, if not more, important than the artists themselves? And I'm your host, Grace Anna.
She was the most famous tragic actress of the Georgian age, with performances so powerful that several members of her audience fainted with fear. Over her 40-year-long career, she captured the hearts of all of England, including the King and Queen, who welcomed her into their royal court. She was painted by some of the greatest masters of art history, including Sir Joshua Reynolds, Thomas Gainsborough, and George Romney, using her portraits to promote her self-image. Though she was known for her tragic roles on the stage, she persevered through personal tragedies off the stage as well, outliving 5 of her 7 children and suffering from multiple miscarriages. Though she had to overcome unimaginable heartbreak, she held her head high in the face of adversity, channeling her grief into her potent performances. As the renowned English writer William Hazlitt once declared, "She raised tragedy to the skies, or brought it down from thence. Power was seated on her brow. Passion emanated from her breast as from a shrine. She was tragedy personified." Listeners, today I introduce you to the famed English actress and queen of tragedy, Sarah Siddons. Sarah was born on July 5, 1755, in Brecon, Wales, into a family of actors. Her parents owned a traveling company of players who performed throughout England's provinces. Sarah began performing with her family's company from a young age, playing a number of different roles. It was clear from early on that Sarah had a natural talent for performing. Acting was in Sarah's blood, and by the time she was a teenager, she was already a seasoned performer. It was also during her teenage years that Sarah fell in love with the handsome actor in their troupe, William Siddons. And William was equally taken with the young and spirited Sarah. After a few years of growing feelings for one another, William proposed to Sarah on stage while in the middle of a performance. Though her parents were reluctant to grant their approval, worried that William would not be able to properly support Sarah, they eventually relented, and Sarah and William were wed in November of 1773. Sarah was only 18 years old. Sarah and William continued to tour the provinces with her family's acting troupe until 1775, when Sarah was recruited by the famed actor David Garrick to perform at his theatre in London. Garrick had heard rave reviews of Sarah from his talent scouts, who had discovered her while performing in Worcester. Always on the lookout for his next rising star, Garrick rushed to sign Sarah before any of his rival theaters recruited her. Sarah debuted on Drury Lane in December of 1775 as Portia in Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice. Unfortunately, her performance was an utter disaster. Stricken with nerves and fatigued from giving birth to her second child just weeks before, Sarah could barely project her voice loud enough for the audience to hear her. It didn't take long for Sarah to become the laughingstock of Drury Lane. And much to her dismay, after a humiliating first season, David Garrick swiftly terminated Sarah's contract. In Sarah's own words, "I was banished from Drury Lane as a worthless candidate." But while many would have given up, Sarah spent the next 6 years developing her craft. After spending a few months touring the provincial cities, she eventually settled in Bath, where she was hired by the Old Orchard Street Theatre. It was here in Bath that Sarah came into her own as a performer. Realizing that she was much better suited for tragedy rather than comedy, Sarah began to develop her repertoire as a tragic actress. Over the next 4 years, Sarah performed in a different tragedy every week, experimenting with her audiences until she found her performative voice. It didn't take long for Sarah to become Bath's most beloved actress, and her performances were attended by the city's most prominent men and women. But after some time, Sarah began dreaming of returning to London. And in 1782, she took a leap of faith and debuted on Drury Lane for the second time. Fortunately, this time Sarah was an instant success. With her newfound confidence, Sarah dazzled audiences with her realistic and hyper-dramatic performances. Sarah would go on to have one of the most impressive acting careers of modern history, eventually becoming England's most acclaimed tragic actress. She became particularly famous for her powerful portrayal of Lady Macbeth, transforming the infamous villainous character into a deeply complex and sympathetic woman. In fact, her performances were so lifelike that members of her audience actually fell ill watching her. As the art historian Shearer West wrote, "People sobbed, fainted, hyperventilated, developed headaches, and loved every minute of it." And as the curator Deborah Gibbon wrote, Sarah Siddons gave performances that seemed to surpass human ability. And Sarah was a star off the stage as well. In fact, she became so famous that terms such as Siddon mania and Siddons fever were coined to describe the public's obsession over her. By the mid-1780s, Sarah was not only a household name, but had become a cultural icon. And though her fame might have looked effortless, Sarah carefully crafted and manipulated her public image to her advantage. Knowing that actresses often fell victim to hypersexualization, Sarah instead emphasized her maternal and matronly nature, playing the role of dutiful wife and mother. She carefully selected roles that would support this image, blurring the lines between the characters she played on stage and her public persona. This allowed Sarah to almost completely avoid the public scandals that took down many of the other actresses of her day. And one of the most effective ways that Sarah was able to manipulate her image, quite literally, was through her many portraits. Sarah was painted by some of the greatest artists of her day, including Sir Joshua Reynolds, Thomas Gainsborough, and George Romney. In fact, she was one of the most depicted women of her age, with nearly 400 separate portraits of her. And Sarah was far from a passive participant in these portraits. Using her knowledge of lighting and shadow from the stage, she posed herself in dramatic settings, never afraid to make direct eye contact with the viewer. And whether she posed as one of her famed characters or herself, she took control of her own image, using these portraits as self-advertisements to project the persona she wanted to the public. In this way, her portraits became mutually beneficial co-collaborations between artist and sitter, Sarah was able to use these portraits to manipulate her public reputation, and artists could use their portraits of Sarah to promote their talents as portraitists. And though Sarah was known as the Queen of Tragedy on the stage, she persevered through unimaginable tragedy in her personal life as well. Sarah outlived 5 of her 7 children, losing 2 children in their infancy and 3 in their adulthood. She also suffered multiple miscarriages, and despite projecting an image as a faithful wife to the public, her marriage to William eventually began coming apart at the seams. Growing resentful that Sarah was the sole breadwinner for the family, William began having affairs and eventually gave Sarah syphilis as a result, a condition that affected Sarah for the rest of her life. She and William formally separated in 1804, an unorthodox decision for the time. Sarah faced all of these hardships with remarkable strength and courage, holding her head high through unimaginable heartbreak. To cope, she channeled her grief into her performances on stage, processing her own emotions through her method acting. Sarah eventually retired from the stage in 1812 at the age of 57, though she continued to give private readings through her late age. She spent the final years of her life in relative quietude at her house in Marylebone until she passed away on June 8, 1831, at the age of 75. Though she was the greatest tragic actress of her day and one of the biggest celebrities of the Georgian age, Sarah Siddons has since unfairly faded into relative obscurity. So in today's episode, we aim to honor Sarah as the remarkable woman she was, as the actress with performances so powerful that her audience sobbed, howled, and fainted, as the cultural icon who came to define the Georgian age, as the savvy publicist who carefully crafted her own image by collaborating with artists on her portraits, and as the fierce and protective mother who held her head high in the face of unimaginable loss and grief. So with that, let's dive in to the extraordinary life of Sarah Siddons. Sarah Kemble was born on July 5, 1755 in Brecon, Wales. Her mother, Sarah Ward, who went by Sally, came from a family of actors. Sally's grandfather founded the Warwickshire Company of Comedians in 1740, a traveling acting troupe who toured England's provinces. In fact, his company of actors were the first recorded company to ever put on a Shakespeare play in Stratford. Her father, Roger Kemble, was an actor in Sally's family troupe and fell in love with Sally shortly after joining, feelings that were mutual. Sally's parents weren't necessarily supportive of their relationship, as Roger was 14 years older than Sally and had a tumultuous romantic history. But nonetheless, Roger and Sally were wed in June of 1753. Once married, they took over the family's theatrical company, renaming it Mr. Kemble's Company of Comedians. Sarah was born 2 years later, the first of 12 children that Roger and Sally would go on to have, although only 8 survived into adulthood. Having 12 children while working as a traveling actor could not have been easy for Sally. As author Joe Willett wrote, looking at Sally Kemble's life from today's perspective, the physical strength required to give birth to this number of children, while touring the country, putting on plays, and sleeping wherever a bed could be found, is striking. She performed on stage throughout her pregnancies, as her daughter Sarah Siddons would also go on to do. Though certainly an unconventional upbringing, Sarah enjoyed a happy childhood. Her early biographers tell tales of her marching into different towns with her family's troupe, while strumming a drum and wearing play costumes. And though they could not offer much in terms of material comforts, Sarah's parents were warm and loving and created a peaceful home environment. As author Joe Willett wrote, the strength of their parents' marriage and the security of the family life they created must surely go some way to explaining the later success of the Kemble children. Sarah's mother was the glue that kept the family together, teaching her children how to read, write, sing, and even play the harpsichord in her off time. As the eldest daughter, Sarah followed her mother around like a shadow, picking up on her mother's maternal instinct and helping care for her younger siblings. Sarah's father was gentle and caring. As Sarah later remarked, "I always loved my father and respected his sound understanding." But their eccentric upbringing did not come without its hardships. Because the troupe did not make much money, Sarah and her siblings often went to bed hungry. Their itinerant lifestyle also began to take a toll. Unlike most children who made friends at school and in their neighborhood, Sarah and her siblings only had each other to socialize with. Looking at the children playing in the town she visited, Sarah began to long for a sense of normalcy, a feeling that would stay with Sarah for the rest of her life. As author Joe Willett described, the experiences of her early life informed Sarah's way of looking at the world. She was remarkably physically strong, but pushed herself to the limit throughout her life, just like the adults among whom she grew up. She proved resourceful and adaptable as an adult professional, skills she learned as a child. Hardly surprisingly, she longed for a permanent home and put roots down as soon as this was achievable. She was often troubled by competitive relationships with other actors, as if she were subconsciously reproducing her early experiences with her siblings. But though their unconventional lifestyle did come at a sacrifice, there was no denying that Sarah and the Kemble family were destined to be actors. As author Joe Willett continued, the Kemble children all had theater in their bones. Before their earliest memories, they were surrounded by the trappings of the family business. Soon they were given small parts in the productions and learned sufficient discipline to memorize their lines and deliver them as required. Creativity was encouraged, and it flourished. Certainly, the life they led was tough, but it was also the stuff of romantic dreams. They were artists, they were storytellers. They were the people who arrived in a dull, everyday, unexceptional place and made magic before the eyes of those who came to see them. Sarah's first recorded stage appearance came in December of 1766, when she was only 11 years old, playing Ariel in Shakespeare's The Tempest. It was clear from early on that Sarah had a special talent for acting. With natural stage presence, a strong and confident voice, and an uncanny ability to tap into deep emotions, Sarah caught the attention of her audiences, even as a young girl. And Sarah also caught the attention of an older and handsome member of the Kemble acting troupe, William Siddons. William was born in 1744 in Staffordshire and had joined the Kemble troupe in his early 20s after running away from home. Though he wasn't the most talented actor, he was a hard worker, willing to play any part the troupe asked of him. He was also especially good-looking. As a contemporary once described, William was extremely handsome, fair on coloring, with a graceful, sedate manner, able to play both Harlequin and Hamlet, and excellent at learning lines. Sarah was only 11 years old when William first joined her family's company. We do not know exactly when the two began developing romantic feelings for one another, but early biographers have suggested that by the time Sarah turned 14, it was clear that she and William had fallen in love. And their feelings only grew when they began to be cast as love interests in the family's plays. As author Joe Willett described, for the couple, being cast in the roles of romantic leads opposite each other must surely have encouraged the relationship to develop. Offstage, they spent their days rehearsing lines together, buttoning each other into costumes as they hurriedly changed, or handing over a vital prop as they waited to make their entrances. William eventually proposed to Sarah in 1770, while on stage in the middle of a performance, a bold act that Sarah ate right up. But because she was only 15 years old, Sarah would need her parents' approval to marry William, approval that they were not willing to give. Her parents were rightfully worried that Sarah was far too young to get married. But more than this, they were not at all confident that William could provide a comfortable life for Sarah. Sarah was their precious first daughter, and William did not live up to their high aspirations for her. As author Joe Willett explained, Sarah's parents were experienced professionals in the world of touring theater. They could see that William Siddons had little talent as an actor, and that William and Sarah's financial prospects would be poor. They must have dreaded the thought that their talented daughter and her uninspiring future fiancé, however handsome and steady, would simply remain as jobbing actors within the company, continuing to take their share of their meager profits. They had wished for more for her. To make matters worse, records from this time show the birth of a young boy in Stratfordshire named William Siddons. Given that Siddons was an extremely unusual surname, the baby was named directly after William, and William's family lived in Stratfordshire. Scholars have proposed that this baby was very likely the illegitimate child of Sarah and William. Quite tragically, the baby only survived a few days. We can only imagine the heartbreak Sarah felt to not only be refused the chance to marry the love of her life, but to also now grieve the loss of their first child. Sarah soon after fell into a deep depression, the first of many depressive spells that she would navigate throughout her lifetime. As author Joe Willett wrote, Sarah would go on to excel playing tragedy. The roles which she made particularly her own concentrated on the tragic heroine as mother. Was Sarah mining these early experiences while keeping a closely guarded secret about what had really happened? Did a piece of Sarah die along with her first child? Unfortunately, as we will see, this would not be the first time that Sarah would have to navigate the grief of losing a child, a grief that would become all too familiar to her as she got older.
We'll continue our story after a brief word from our advertisers.
Cast your mind back to your formative tween years. Did you maybe have a poster of your fave teen heartthrob on your wall? Did you maybe dabble in a little bit of fan fiction? Maybe you secretly thought that if you could just meet your celebrity crush, they would fall in love with you? My name is Allegra, and I've made it my mission to understand how we get sucked into fandoms. I believe that the media that we consumed as children plays a huge part in our lives. So, every other week, we revisit one huge cultural phenomena from our formative years. Come listen to Stan on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.
The season hasn't even started, but everyone's already picking a champion. Trade those predictions on Kalshi, America's #1 prediction market platform. Right now, the Rams are the favorites and trading at 16% to win it all, meaning a $100 trade pays out $590 if they lift the trophy. Download the Kalshi app and use code HOOPS to get $20 when you trade $20. KALSHI. Kalshi. Trade on anything. 18 plus only. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Kalshi products are not available in all jurisdictions. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory.
Welcome back, listeners. Now let's dive back in.
Sarah's depression became so severe that it was eventually impossible for her to continue performing on stage. And so, in 1770, Sarah's parents sent her to work as a domestic servant in an estate in Warwickshire. Her parents hoped that by sending Sarah to a stable home, she could rebuild her physical and emotional strength. The They also secretly hoped that time and space away from William might change Sarah's mind about marrying him. It was here in Warwickshire that Sarah spent the next many months. Sarah had never before seen such a grand and lavish estate. Having spent the entirety of her childhood on the road, she had also never before experienced the security and comfort that came with a permanent home. She began to have dreams of creating a home like this for herself one day, and vowed to always provide a comfortable and steady home for her future family, a promise that Sarah certainly was to keep. It didn't take long for Sarah to become a favorite servant in the house, and she soon after graduated from maid to female companion of the house's lady. She was even known to recite monologues from Shakespeare and Milton for the family on her off time. And she also took lessons in sculpture, a hobby that Sarah would return to later in life. But despite her parents' hope that Sarah would forget about William during her time away, Sarah only grew more and more committed to him as each month passed. Over time, her parents relented and allowed William to visit Sarah in Warwickshire, visits that Sarah greatly looked forward to. As author Joe Willett beautifully described, William and Sarah probably strolled in the gardens together whenever he visited. The two discussed how much they meant to each other and planned their joint future. They remained steadfast. Despite everything that they had been through, they were still determined to be married. By the time Sarah turned 18, there was little her parents could do to discourage her from marrying William, and they eventually gave their permission for Sarah to wed. And so, on November 26, 1773, Sarah left the house in Warwickshire and married William at the Holy Trinity Church in Coventry. Sarah was 19 years old, and William 29. How did Sarah feel as she looked into her dear William's eyes and shared her vows? Was she filled with nerves and excitement? Or did she feel a wave of relief to finally be able to call the man she loved her own? As author Joe Willett described, what should have felt like a day of joy instead seemed like the end to a strong struggle. Sarah had a handsome groom who was even-tempered. For his part, he was marrying someone spirited, beautiful, eloquent, and talented. In comedies, marriage is often the end of the story. And this might indeed have been an endpoint for the young married couple. They would perhaps have expected to make some kind of living on the traveling circuit, bringing up their family in much the same way Sarah had herself spent her childhood. Perhaps like Sarah's parents before them, they could have taken over management of the Kemble troupe and improved their financial circumstances to a modest extent. But their future together would prove to be a very different one. Their first few years of married life turned out to be far more turbulent than they might have predicted. There would be emotional highs, but also painful lows for them both. Sarah and William returned to her family's company of actors soon after their wedding. Sarah was officially billed as Sarah Siddons for the first time that December. She also became pregnant with their first legitimate child shortly afterwards. And that October, just 11 months after their wedding, Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby boy, whom she named Henry. It was also around this time that Sarah first caught her lucky break as an actress. That summer, Sarah caught the eye of a man named Lord Bruce, who was impressed with her performance as Belvidera from Thomas Otway's Venice Preserved. In fact, Lord Bruce was so moved by Sarah's performance that he nearly broke down in tears in the audience. Lord Bruce happened to be a particularly influential man, with connections to the theater world in London. Wowed by Sarah's performance, he contacted the famed actor and theater manager David Garrick and suggested that he consider recruiting Sarah to his company. Always on the lookout for a new star, Garrick quickly sent a talent scout on his behalf to watch Sarah perform. Fortunately, the scout was just as impressed as Lord Bruce had been, noting that Sarah had, one of the most strikingly beautiful faces for stage effect that I ever beheld. He also noted that for such a young actress, Sarah was particularly skilled in connecting with her audience, as well as fully inhabiting the characters she played on stage. After the performance, the scout rushed to introduce himself to Sarah to discuss the prospect of her joining Garrick's company. Sarah was so excited by his proposal that she could hardly contain herself. She had always dreamed of performing in London and could not believe that her dreams were about to come true. Sarah was formally invited to London a few days later by Garrick himself, who offered her a contract with his company in Drury Lane. Because only men could sign contracts, William finalized the agreement on Sarah's behalf, adding an addendum that requested he also be hired by Garrick as an actor. Sarah, who was already pregnant with their second child, would begin her residency with Garrick as soon as her baby was born. Fortunately, Sarah gave birth to another healthy baby on November 5th, 1775, this time a little girl whom she named Sally. Barely a month later, Sarah set out to London to officially launch her career as an actress on Drury Lane. She debuted at the Drury Lane Theatre on December 29, 1775, playing Portia in Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice. Though Sarah was already a seasoned performer, she had never before acted in front of such a large and distinguished audience. As author Joe Willett described, Sarah was so nervous that even her first entrance onto the stage appeared tentative. Rather than striding confidently on, she tottered, a delicate and fragile-looking figure. Her nerves overpowered her. To make things worse, it seemed to the audience as if Sarah was not entirely sure where to fix her eyes or where to plant her feet. And worst of all, no sooner did she start saying her lines than her voice dried up almost completely. Sarah was not only still weak from delivering her baby just weeks prior, but was suddenly struck with intense and debilitating stage fright. Much to her horror, she almost completely lost her ability to speak. As one audience member described, she spoke in broken, tremulous tones, and at the close of each sentence, her voice sank into a horrid whisper that was almost inaudible. Unsurprisingly, Sarah received scathing reviews in the press, calling her a provincial actress not talented enough for Garrick's company. Her debut in London could not have gone worse, and she soon became the laughingstock of the theater world. Because she had signed a contract, Sarah had to continue to perform on Drury Lane over the next few weeks, despite her growing trepidation and dread. As author Joe Willett explained, Sarah had real strengths as an actress. She was beautiful, she had an arresting stage presence, she knew her stagecraft, how to interact with other actors, how to handle props, but she had not yet worked out where her strengths and weaknesses lay as a performer. True, she had been acting all her life, but never at this level. It must have felt very different when the famous David Garrick gave her direction from the times her father told her to move. Sarah knew her parents would be disappointed in her. It would be difficult to go back to them, her tail between her legs. And to make matters worse, Sarah was still recovering from giving birth, growing increasingly more exhausted by the day, navigating caring for 2 infants at home while performing on stage each night. As author Joe Willett continued, Sarah was short of sleep, feeding her youngest child and caring for a demanding toddler. She was in a city that she did not know, in lodgings with little space for a young family. She married William for love, but he was not the most sympathetic of husbands. Sarah was both overworked and overwhelmed, and must have felt incredibly alone as she faced humiliation on the stage night after night. Sarah's first season with Garrick was such a disappointment that he quickly canceled her contract as soon as it expired. In Sarah's own words, "I was banished from Drury Lane as a worthless candidate for fame and fortune." Upon hearing the news, Sarah felt like a complete and utter failure and fell into a deep depression. As she wrote in a letter, "Who can conceive the size of this cruel disappointment, this dreadful reverse of all of my ambitious hopes?" As time went on and the weight of Sarah's failure grew heavier and heavier, her mental health continued to spiral until she was on the verge of a breakdown. And that burden was only worsened by the fact that she had 2 small children to feed. As author Joe Willett explained, aged only 21, Sarah must have felt that her chances of any kind of meaningful career were over. And this was not simply about her professional reputation as an actress. The fate of her children was also at stake. Acting was all she knew, and yet even that was now being called into question. There was no welfare state to support them. And who would give a moment's thought to a striking young woman telling everyone she meets about how it all looked for a brief interval as an actress at the famous Drury Lane? With 2 small mouths to feed, Sarah knew she could not afford to wallow for much longer. But the only way she knew how to support herself was on the stage, and she could not bring herself to return to her family's theater company. What would Sarah do next? Who would she turn to in her time of need? And what stage would be willing to accept her after such a failure in London? What Sarah could not have known in her darkest moment was that her troubles would soon be all behind her. In the years ahead, Sarah would not only develop her voice as a performer, but would eventually become the greatest tragic actress England had ever seen.
We'll continue our story after a brief word from our advertisers.
Cast your mind back to your formative tween years. Did you maybe have a poster of your fave teen heartthrob on your wall? Did you maybe dabble in a little bit of fan fiction? Maybe you secretly thought that if you could just meet your celebrity crush, they would fall in love with you? My name is Allegra, and I've made it my mission to understand how we get sucked into fandoms. I believe that the media that we consumed as children plays a huge part in our lives. So, every other week, we revisit one huge cultural phenomena from our formative years. Come listen to Stan on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back, listeners. Now let's dive back in. Fortunately, Sarah's depression eventually lifted, and she began to find work at smaller provincial theaters throughout England. And after a few months of touring, she was eventually offered a place in Tate Wilkinson's company in York, where Sarah settled with her family for a few months. It was in York that Sarah began to slowly build back her confidence as a performer. She began refining her performative voice, figuring out which roles worked best for her, and even playing a number of breeches parts, in which she took on male characters such as Hamlet. Over time, the haunting memories of her failure in London began to fade, and Sarah fell into her stride as a performer. By the fall of 1778, Sarah was offered a contract at the prestigious Old Orchard Street Theatre in Bath, where she would spend the next 4 years further developing her craft. Bath was a popular destination for London's elite circles to both vacation and convalesce, taking advantage of the city's many health spas. Though it wasn't as big as London, Bath certainly would offer Sarah the opportunity to connect with important contacts in the theater world. In fact, the Orchard Street Theatre ranked just below London's Drury Lane and Covent Garden. It was in Bath that Sarah really came into her own as a performer. No longer afraid of failure, she began experimenting with her performances, figuring out which roles and methods worked best. she quickly discovered that she was much better suited for tragic roles rather than comedic, and began building her repertoire of tragic characters. Over her 4 years in Bath, Sarah played over 100 different roles, fine-tuning each of her character portrayals. Her performances were immensely successful, and it didn't take long for Sarah to become the darling of Bath's theater scene. And as Sarah's success grew, so did her income, and she was able to provide her family with a stable and comfortable home. Because Sarah now made enough money on her own, William gave up his own acting career to become Sarah's full-time manager and line coach. He would also need to help out at home with their growing family. In July of 1779, Sarah gave birth to their third child, a healthy baby girl named Maria. And in 1782, she gave birth again to a girl named Elizabeth Ann. Sarah must have felt like she was on top of the world. Her career was finally flourishing, her marriage was supportive and stable, and she was able to provide a comfortable life for her budding family. In fact, Sarah would often remark that her years in Bath had been the happiest of her life. And with Sarah's growing success came several social perks as well. Sarah quickly became connected to the elite circles of Bath. In fact, her fan base included some of the most important men and women in the country, such as the Earl of Aylesbury and the Duchess of Devonshire. As author Joe Willett explained, Sarah began to establish herself as a hugely talented tragic actress and created a network of aristocratic patrons. With her striking good looks and her beautiful voice, Sarah was able to move up the social ladder with relative ease. And as her social status climbed, Sarah also began to catch the attention of the city's rising artists. Like actors, painters came to Bath to hone their artistic skills and build clientele before testing the London market. Among these painters was the rising portraitist Thomas Beech, who had trained with Sir Joshua Reynolds at the Royal Academy. Beech painted 2 separate portraits of Sarah between the years of 1781 and 1782. In these portraits, we see a co-collaboration between artist and sitter, simultaneously advertising Sarah's talent as an actress, as well as promoting Beech's skill as a portraitist. As art historian Robin Asleson wrote, intent on transforming herself from a failed comic actress into a successful tragedian, Siddons accepted the assistance of Beech, whose professional ambitions melded amicably with her own. In the first of these portraits, Beech portrays Sarah seated at a 3/4 angle, as she turns her head to stare directly at the viewer. She wears a stylish ruffled white dress, with a blue velvet bow tied eloquently at her waist. Here Sarah is brimming with a youthful beauty. Her cheeks are perfectly rouged, her lips are rosy and supple, and her dark sparkling eyes are magnetic. Rather than portraying Sarah on the stage, in this portrait, Beech has captured Sarah in a private and reflective moment. With an open book resting in her lap, Sarah is caught in the midst of reading, or perhaps carefully researching her next role. She is both serious and studied, intellectual and refined, an image that Sarah intentionally wanted to project. As Robin Asleson continued, contemporary reports attest to Sarah's habitual interaction with some of the greatest thinkers of her day, and by her own admission, she craved intellectual society to circulate her mind. Beech portrayed Sarah again a few months later. Titled Portrait of Mrs. Siddons in the Character of Melancholy from Milton's Penseroso, here Sarah's skills as a performer are on full display. Sarah is garbed in a dark velvet dress that spills onto the floor like a puddle. Wrapped around her head is a translucent black veil that blends with her long chestnut hair. With her hands clasped, Sarah walks towards the viewer dramatically, as if she is about to begin her monologue. Unlike in his first portrait, here Sarah is playing a character, the goddess Melancholy from John Milton's poem Il Penseroso. As one contemporary critic wrote, Beech's portrait has all the grandeur of the imagined character, as well as all the grandeur, elegance, and simplicity that we admire in Mrs. Siddons. Beech's ambitious second portrait of Sarah was not only well received by the press, but worked as a mutually beneficial advertisement to showcase both Sarah and Beech's respective skills. Sarah as a performer, able to embody her characters, and Beech as a portraitist, able to capture his sitter's spirit. As we will see, this would not be the last time Sarah would collaborate with painters to create mutually beneficial portraits.
We'll continue our story after a brief word from our advertisers.
Cast your mind back to your formative tween years. Did you maybe have a poster of your fave teen heartthrob on your wall? Did you maybe dabble in a little bit of fan fiction? Maybe you secretly thought that if you could just meet your celebrity crush, they would fall in love with you? My name is Allegra, and I've made it my mission to understand how we get sucked into fandoms. I believe that the media that we consumed as children plays a huge part in our lives. So, every other week, we revisit one huge cultural phenomena from our formative years. Come listen to Stan on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back, listeners. Now let's dive back in.
As Sarah continued to rise the ranks of Bath's theater world, the shadow of her disastrous first season in London grew smaller and smaller. Now much more confident in herself as a performer, Sarah began to dream of returning to London's stage. And in the summer of 1782, Sarah got her golden opportunity when she received an invitation from Richard Sheridan to perform at his theater on Drury Lane. Sheridan would not only pay her far more than what she was making in Bath, but would give her the chance to redeem herself and prove her talents as a performer in London. Though leaving her comfort zone in Bath would not be easy, Sheridan's offer was too tempting to refuse. As author Joe Willett explained, her 4 years in Bath had given Sarah the confidence she needed to accept Sheridan's offer and risk her reputation in London a second time. The Bath years had provided her small family with some hugely valued security. This, in turn, had allowed Sarah to find her real strengths as an actress. She had shown she could conquer the provinces and succeed in the fashionable city of Bath. But the real prize, that of success as a performer in one of London's 2 royal theaters, still eluded her. The first time she had failed. Now she was prepared to take that risk for a second time. But saying goodbye to Bath would not be easy. Her time in Bath had not only given Sarah the opportunity to develop her voice as a performer, but helped her regain her confidence in herself and reignite her dreams of stardom. As author Joe Willett continued, no longer was she the tongue-tied, nervous-racked, too young mother, fearful of failing into poverty. Instead, she was the successful and confident Bath tragedian, determined to put right her past failures. Sarah had not only improved her performance skills in Bath, she had also learned the vitally important lesson that her reputation was something which needed careful handling. She now knew that she needed to manage her own image. She now understood the perils of celebrity, where her reputation might be lost at any time. Shortly after accepting Sheridan's offer, Sarah gave a farewell performance in Bath in July of 1782. At the end of the performance, Sarah recited a heartfelt original poem to her audience. As the poem read, "The time draws nigh when I must bid adieu to this delightful spot, nay, even to you. To you whose fostering kindness reared my name, overlooked my faults, but magnified my fame. Sarah then proceeded to give what would later be known as her famous 3 Reasons speech. To defend her need to move to London, Sarah called 3 of her children to the stage, explaining that it was her duty as their mother to support them as best she could, and London would provide the best opportunity for her to do so. It was not only an effective speech, but a brilliant form of self-marketing. Using her children as the driving force behind her decision to leave Bath, not only garnered her sympathy and support from her audience, but projected the public image of devoted mother that Sarah wanted to put forth, an image that she would perfect as time went on. In fact, the speech was so popular that it was even published in the Bath Chronicle and Weekly Gazette. Sarah and her family moved to London in September of 1782. Though she was now far more confident in her abilities as an actress, Sarah could not help but feel nervous about her return to the London stage. As she later remarked, "My own fate and that of my little family hung upon my success." Sarah debuted in London for the second time on October 10, 1782, playing the role of Isabella in Thomas Southern's play The Fatal Marriage. How did Sarah feel as she walked out onto the stage? Was she filled with nerves and apprehension? Were her hands clammy with sweat? Or did she feel a renewed sense of purpose? Was she ready to make her big comeback? Fortunately, Sarah's return to the London stage was a massive success. As author Joe Willett wrote, her performance proved to be a triumph. Her tenderness in the role and her exquisitely sweet voice went to every heart. This time, it did not fail her. The men in the audience were moved to tears, while the women were in hysterics. And as a critic declared, she wore her sorrows with so much persuasive sincerity that she made the audience her advocates and created a universal and melting sympathy all around. Never before has a performer played the part of a tragic heroine with such intensity. She makes the story come to vivid life in a way no one else has ever done. In fact, her death scene was reportedly so realistic that 2 women in the audience even fainted. Sarah's performance in The Fatal Marriage turned her into an overnight sensation. She continued to perform to sold-out audiences over the course of the season. In fact, the show became so popular that the theater had to add 16 additional performances to accommodate public demand. As a critic remarked, huge crowds pressing to see Sarah Siddons were near suffocation, and it didn't take long for London's high society to catch word of Sarah's success and begin clamoring to the theater for a chance to see her perform. One newspaper even joked that Sarah's performances looked more like a meeting room for the House of Lords than a theater. Any apprehension that Sarah may have felt as she first stepped onto the stage immediately disappeared. With each triumphant performance, Sarah grew more and more confident in herself. Not only had she not given up on herself, but she had managed to find greater success than she could ever have dreamed of. As author Joe Willett exclaimed, "The ignominy of her first season at Drury Lane was now behind her. She had banished her past. She had scaled the heights. Her life would never be the same again." At the age of 27, Sarah had officially made it as London's hottest new actress. Sarah continued to perform on Drury Lane in a number of different tragic roles over the course of the following season. And when the London theaters closed over the summer, she toured the provinces, as well as Ireland and Scotland. Everywhere Sarah went, she was met with roaring audiences and rave reviews. In fact, Sarah became so popular that terms like Siddons fever and Siddons mania were coined to describe the public's growing obsession over her. Soon the newspapers began to cover her every move and detail of her private life. Some of her more crazed fans even began showing up at her house, desperate for a close-up look at their beloved star. As Sarah later recalled, "My door was soon beset by various persons quite unknown to me, whose curiosity was on the alert to see the new actress, some of whom actually forced their way into my drawing room in spite of our opposition." We can only imagine how terrifying it must have been for Sarah and her family to find frenzied fans barging their way through her front door. Sarah was especially popular with women and became a role model within female communities. Scholar Shearer West proposed that women in particular were drawn to Sarah because she allowed them to feel emotions that they were generally discouraged to feel in public. As she wrote, "Siddons enabled women to express extreme emotions denied to them in everyday life, and to do so in the relative safety of the theatrical environment." And as author Joe Willett attested, Sarah had the gift of making those who saw her empathize with the character she was playing. She emoted like no one else, and her audiences emoted right back to her. When she was up, they were up. When she was down, they sobbed along with her. Sarah touched a chord in them in a way that no one else had ever done. The emotions Sarah unlocked in her audiences became an enormous phenomenon, and this inevitably resulted in great fame for Sarah, along with vast earnings. Suddenly, she was a household name. And this was only the beginning of Sarah's tremendous success. Her fame would only continue to climb to unheard of heights, and she would eventually become the greatest tragic actress England had ever seen. Though she already had so much to be proud of, Sarah could never have imagined just how much fame and fortune awaited her on the horizon. As author Joe Willett continued, "From now on, a life beckons for Sarah where she will never be out of the spotlight. She will be mobbed by her fans wherever she goes. The newspapers will feature gossipy details about her private life. Aristocratic society will fall over itself to make her acquaintance. She will become the darling of the royal family. As for money, she will go on to earn even more than her predecessor, David Garrick. She will learn how to play the all-important fame game. She will ensure that she is painted by the greatest portrait artists of the day, and that engraved copies of these painted images are widely sold so that her face becomes familiar even to those who never see her perform. For the rest of her life, she will be a superstar, the first celebrity actress." I hope you enjoyed part 1 of ArtMuse's episode on the famed tragic actress Sarah Siddons. We will finish Sarah's story and honor her immense legacy in part 2 of this episode. I have included images, resources, and suggestions for further reading on the ArtMuse website and Instagram. ArtMuse is produced by Kula Production Company. Today's episode was written by me, your host, Grace Anna. Stay tuned as I continue to share the stories of the women behind some of the world's most important works of art. Until next time, bye for now.
Cast your mind back to your formative tween years. Did you maybe have a poster of your fave teen heartthrob on your wall? Did you maybe dabble in a little bit of fan fiction? Maybe you secretly thought that if you could just meet your celebrity crush, they would fall in love with you? My name is Allegra, and I've made it my mission to understand how we get sucked into fandoms. I believe that the media that we consumed as children plays a huge part in our lives. So, every other week, we revisit one huge cultural phenomena from our formative years. Come listen to Stan on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.